within Trinidad in the Caribbean, where they're embracing new technologies, using drone technology and participatory geographic information systems to work with people on the ground and the indigenous communities, as well as policymakers, to better understand how to prepare for the disasters and other extreme events that impact in the region, on our regions. Let me move to nature-based solutions. Indigenous populations, that's my timer. Indigenous populations are quite aware of the value of the natural ecosystems. Vetiver grass, for example, has been used by the Kalinago in Dominica for slope stabilization, and it's being upscaled and used elsewhere in the Caribbean, reintroduced rather. Mangrove replanting, it has been spoken about earlier, and the benefits of mangroves as a line of defense to the coastal zone areas where settlements tend to be concentrated in islands. Let me just reflect, let me just go back quickly. There are climate funds that have been approved among small island developing states, the Green Climate Fund and the adaptation funds and the global environmental funds. But these have been approved. It doesn't mean that those pledges have got down to the actual countries. And I want you to be quite cognizant of those issues. The vernacular architecture, that has been covered, but we do know of old traditions of building with the hip roofs, using verandas for cooling buildings, and it becomes more popular with heat stress and so on occurring in the various island territories. And of course, elevating your buildings as a form of flood proofing. So that has been dealt with. There is indigenous knowledge to inform the practice, and we do need to revisit whether we can reintroduce these forms of building typologies in the island states. I'm going to move to disaster risk reduction, which I think everyone in the room has come here to hear. What are we doing in terms of disaster risk reduction? How do you deal with 2 Category 5 hurricanes in the region in 1 year? That's an issue. In 2017, when Hurricane Maria struck, Dominica lost 225% of its annual GDP. The insurance sector has already confirmed that 70% of properties in the Caribbean remain uninsured, and there is a knock-on effect. The circular economy is impacted. The tourism sector is affected, the fisheries sector is affected, reconstruction activity, and so on. Of course, people are affected. People lose lives. The psychological stress of hurricanes and droughts and floods and heat stress, it's mounting. All of those are mounting, and we need to really quantify those impacts. So this is Beryl, the first ever recorded hurricane to strike the Caribbean as early as June. Never before. We find in our research that a lot of work is being done on hurricanes and flooding when we talk about disasters, but there is an under-reporting of other hazards that are coming. For example, the coastal erosion as a result of coral reef damage because of the heating up of the ocean waters. We are experiencing extremely hot temperatures. You don't have the temperatures falling at 6 o'clock in the evening. It remains hot up until 8 p.m. in the night. That's unusual for us. And of course, there's an underreporting of sea level rise in terms of how it's affecting us. So to underscore the point, much work has been done on hurricanes and flooding, and the disaster risk reduction community tends to focus on that. But I think we need to shift focus to other hazards that are going to affect us more and more. Finance, that's the elephant in the room. What we are seeing in the small island states is spiraling debt, which is shifting what should have been allocated for development to recovery and reconstruction efforts. When we talk about loss and damage, we're talking about economic costs, the hurricanes, flooding, and so on. But we don't often talk about cultural heritage, and that's difficult to quantify. So there is need for, going forward, more research in that area. Much has been said about rehabilitation and recovery costs, but when we talk about loss and damage, there's not enough attention that's being paid at the moment to that aspect. So the question is, what do we do to finance our efforts? We need to look at the fact that we are off track in attaining our sustainable development goals, both in the short and the long term. When the international agencies were set up, and the UN agencies, they were set up to deal with the large countries post-World War II. But many of the island states were not even independent at that stage. And so the financial architecture was not designed to cope, to give us guidance and to deal with our issues as we see it today. Sure. So we come down to the key takeaways, essentially, that we need to accelerate mainstreaming indigenous knowledge and local knowledge into policy. That requires stakeholder engagement on a continuous basis and mutual support, obviously, to be embedded in that process. We don't need to have solutions being imported. We know of some of those solutions. They're homegrown solutions. We don't need new wine in new bottles. We obviously have good rum in the Caribbean, and we can use our solutions to better help us in terms of nature-based solutions and the use of the vernacular architecture. And I want to say in closing that the finance architecture needs to be recalibrated, redesigned to make it easier for us to accept. The funds are there, but my goodness, when I see some of the applications and the proposals, it's a minefield because we don't have the data. Data is usually very difficult to come by. And so going forward, we need to develop a data hub that will help us develop much more robust policies and rigorous methodologies for assessment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for all these insights from SEEDS that are, of course, specific to SEEDS, but then valuable for other regions. And thank you for reminding that there is no one solution that fits all from one side, and another reminding that, anyway, traditional knowledge and science knowledge, they go hands in hands in disaster risk reduction strategies. So our next speaker, and I would like Nguyen to come to the podium and tell us, being involved in multiple actions in Vietnam, what's your insights to share about international policy dialogue? How can it be strengthened? Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Now I'm very pleasure to have a chance to introduce to you about our project. That is restoration and maintenance the waterway of Huế Sitaro. Huế Sitaro is my homeland. Responding to the impact of climate change. Yeah. My report, I want to start it. Okay. Can you see on the map the Huế city is the ancient capital of the Nguyễn dynasty. It's the home of Huế Monument Complex, a special national monument recognized by UNESCO as World Cultural Heritage as 1993. The ancient Huế, located on the bank of the Hương River, is capital of Vietnamese cultural and used to be a national capital, education and cultural and political center of Vietnam under the Nguyễn dynasty. Home to national features, including complex of temple, pagoda, and monument, and the river front And this city welcome to a million visitors come to visit every year. You see on the map, I want to introduce about the waterway networks of Citadel. Can you see on the map is the blue is the waterway network of my city. The Citadel waterway network, a component of the monument complex, was constructed in the 1805 under Zalong Raid and completed under Mingmak Raid at 1832 with an extremely important function. The first is being the traffic artery of Citadel under the third island. The second is protecting the Citadel. The third is regulating flows, balancing and maintaining the ecosystem. And the last is protecting safety and livelihoods of local people. After nearly 200 years for Exeter, due to the impact of time, war, and especially in the impact of natural disaster, the waterway network of the Hue city has been severely damaged. So sorry. I can change my. Can you see on the photo, that is the image of Hue network and waterway network. Scholars, the first score is the due to the human impact. Can you see on the photo? The people occupying and building on the relief area affected the landscape and the flow of water. And due to the impact of natural disaster and climate change, as you know, the rainy and floods have a seriously damage of the architecture structure of the Hue Monument Complex, including the waterway network that is not only historical site, but also play an extremely important role in regulating and draining flows for the Citadel. Implementation measure. The first, we're focusing on the communication, raising the awareness of heritage conservation, providing way to prevent disaster risk for the communication, especially focused on the young generation and vulnerable group. Relocation, resettlement, and stabilization of nearly 2,000 households, encroaching on the protected area of the waterway network to restore the original area of the waterway survey, riverbed and lakebed. After we finish the project, we have a resume. The first restoration and maintenance of the Hue Citadel Waterway Network, an important component of the Hue Monument Complex World Cultural Heritage, improving the ecosystem, helping the waterway network further promote its function of coordinating the ecosystem, improve the environment for the Hue Citadel. Creating new tourist destinations to attract domestic and foreign visitors, promoting economic development, and bringing new livelihood for the local people. Ensuring welfare for local people, contributing to the economic, cultural, social development of the Hue province. Raising community awareness of climate change, providing skill in the recognizing, responding, and reducing natural disaster risk and adapting to observe situation of climate change for the local and non-local residents. The restoration and maintenance for the Huisitaro waterway network system is a typical case of combination between cultural heritage conservation with disaster risk reduction. This approach, aligned with the Sendai framework, has effectively safeguarded the life and livelihoods of local community in Vietnam. It underscores the critical role of the implementing the Sendai framework, recommendation in achieving the sustainable development goal, both now and the future. That is my report. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for these wonderful insights and actually showing us very specific examples where heritage is in the heart of territorial development, and all the reconstructions and all the activities around the heritage development, they bring to further, well, more larger recommendations for sustainable development. So we will move further, and I will ask Serge to tell us some insights about nature-based solutions, because in 2015, when Sendai was crafted, ecosystem mentioned as valuable inputs for disaster risk reductions. And since then, well, there is a major boost and shift in adoption and, well, mainstreaming of nature-based solutions. So from perspective of Agence Française de Développement, what would be your insights or approach and best practices?
Thank you. So yes, I'm from Agence Française de Développement Group, which consists of Agence Française de Développement, our technical cooperation branch Expertise France, and our private sector financing branch Proparco. We, as a group, provide most of French technical and financial development assistance. Is it working? Oops. Okay, oops, no. Okay, sorry. AFD is committed to Paris Agreement implementation on climate change, and most of our work on disaster risk and resilience management is in the framework of climate change. And we work in more than 100 countries, so we have developed a very broad toolbox of technical and financial tools to answer the various situations of countries and the various steps of risk management in climate change, adaptation, mitigation, adaptation, managing the residual risk, and building back better when, unfortunately, risk prevention did not work. We have devoted 7.5 billion euro last year to fight against climate change, including 3 billion for adaptation. And so 75% of what we do in DDR is part of this financing on climate adaptation. We are also committed to work more on biodiversity, following the Kunming-Montreal Agreement. And we have devoted last year 1 billion euro on biodiversity. And this has led us to two important strategic decisions. The first one is not correct, yes, is to work as much as possible on nature-based solution as defined by IUCN. It's not always possible, but it's our preference when it's possible. And the second one is to work on locally led adaptation according to the principle defined by the Global Coalition on Adaptation, so that, as was mentioned by several speakers before, we work with the communities, building on their knowledge of their own environment to work both on resilience and risk reduction and adaptation. We have several examples. I just picked two because we have limited time. In Mozambique, we work in northern Mozambique on the protection on mangrove. So that's a work at different scales. At the watershed level, we work with local authorities and the Mozambican Red Cross to work to prepare disaster readiness. And at local level, we work with local communities, and you have a map of local area as seen by the villagers and the mapping of risk by the villagers. And a lot of investment has been put in the mangrove, as was said also before. It's a key element to reduce the impact of natural disaster and typhoons with rehabilitation and protection of mangrove using natural knowledge of people, of techniques and zoning of their areas. In the seeds, well, I hope I'm not going to tell some silly things. I'm watched. We are part of a large project which is called Kiwa, which promotes, again, local indigenous knowledge to fight and adapt to climate change with different approach, some very small projects, because as donors, we like large projects, of course, for economies of scale, but if you want to work on local knowledge, you have to be able to reach local communities with small amounts. You cannot flood people with money if you want things to be sustainable. So there is a call for very small projects. And also we have regional cooperation, so larger projects for exchange between communities. Because climate change also needs people to take new ideas, to see how things are evolving in their neighbors, so that they can adapt sometimes new techniques that are more fitted to their ecosystem. And this is not only for developing countries, by the way. In my previous posting, we had technical cooperation between France and Turkey, because the French Forest Administration knows that in a few decades, the climate will be like Turkey, so they want to learn about how to fight against pests from Turkish local knowledge, because it will be adapted to French challenge in a few decades. So regional cooperation is also important. Maybe two more ideas before I conclude. First, local knowledge. I presented two very short projects on natural resources, but nature and indigenous knowledge is also inside the cities, so don't forget about it. And the example on Afghanistan, I think, was on how to build better, to build back better, was quite insightful. And the second one is, yes, we must work and use with local communities and promote local knowledge, but we must also help them to formalize. That's also the cooperation with international, with formal science is important. Also because there is hopefully a potential market for blue and green carbon markets in the future. But one of the big challenges for carbon market is the proof of concept and the capacity to certify your carbon production. So for this, you need a formal approach. And it's important that local communities can access to these markets through help to formalize their knowledge into a form that is acceptable to markets. So technical assistance is sometimes useful as well for this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Serge. It's amazing that we are all speaking the same language and terminologies, and that, again, referring to Sendai framework, back 15 years ago, it was ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction. Now it looks, and from well, for example, they have strategies and implementations. The language is shifted toward nature-based solutions for disaster risk reduction as well. And just, of course, we'll continue to reflect how it will be further reflected in post-Sendai and where we are looking now. Thanks a lot. And now I would like Antonio, our Director of Ecological and Earth Division. Yes, to tell us easy question, what's UNESCO vision and practical answer response to tackle interlinkages between nature, culture, indigenous people, natural-based solutions to build more resilient future?
Thank you, Irina. I will come back to you. Good afternoon to everybody, distinguished delegates, dear panelists, dear guests, and especially thank you to Soshiro and his team for putting us all together, discussing this very important matter. It's a very small team, but very enthusiastic and very skilled, and we should pay a tribute to them for this effort. Irina, you put a question that is quite difficult to answer, because UNESCO's vision is your vision. It's not something that we are planning or doing here together alone, isolated. UNESCO is you. It's delegations, member states, scientific community working together to have and to build a vision, but more important, to go to the field and implement it. And really we are facing and we are living a moment where we need to have a clear vision, but more important, we need to have capacity to, and pragmatically, to implement it. This is what we are trying to do in the different sectors, not only inside the house, but with partners. Yesterday we had a nice talk. And what I am bringing to you here, it's just a little sample of examples, concrete examples that we are trying to promote together with all partners around the world, and based in particular in one of the intergovernmental programs, so your program too. This is about, as we heard here, about making peace with nature. We live in a moment that the planet is so small, that we are so many, that we are all exposed to risk situations. And risk situations can come from the social point of view, the natural point of view, from external and internal dimensions. And I will not spend much time speaking about this, because you know much better than me. But we have some capacity, some programs that were designed to promote this, peace with nature, understanding better how nature works and how we work as a community, as a society, and how everything works together, and what are the interlinkages between the social systems, the economic systems, the natural systems. That's why some years ago, here at UNESCO, the MAP program, the Man and the Biosphere programs that I am just using as an example. We have also the World Heritage Convention and programs, the geoparks and other, like the eco-hydrology sites and other programs on education and different sectors. But I am bringing just an example that brings sites, and the biosphere reserves in particular, they are not just pristine areas to see with the strange binoculars as representing pristine and well-functioning places. We have, since more than 50 years, almost 800 UNESCO biosphere reserves with 300 million people living there. So it's not just about the ecosystems and natural dimensions and species, it's about us. It's about us and the environment that we live in. And there we try to combine on a daily basis three functions: development, so as there is people, we need to promote socio-economic development. We need to learn and inspire, and this is made by education, by research, by bringing also together cultural, traditional knowledge and indigenous knowledge, together with scientific knowledge, and then using all this to preserve the identity, whether natural and social, of the places. Because when we ensure territorial integrity, we are promoting adaptation and most important even, resilience. So I bring you some of the examples that are happening in some of these sites where we combine some of the ideas that were already expressed here and exchange. Are they enough? No. Are they the magic tool that is solving the problems? No. But they are being tested, they are being experimented, they are being used to ensure at local level the principles that we all agree, and we should look at them as living laboratories, and maybe we can benefit if we are able to transfer and share this experience through networking and doing more investment. Because in fact, what happens in a biosphere reserve, in a UNESCO biosphere reserve, can happen anywhere. And the anywhere is the rest of the planet. So, for instance, in the Amazon, we have a project that combines, in fact, local and traditional knowledge with geospatial new techniques, and then we do an assessment, an integrated assessment and management plan design for some areas, combining concrete interventions to ensure some resilience and income for the local communities, and with techniques that are helping to promote awareness, early warning systems, and capacity to do the first steps when some risk or some event is happening. It's the same in Cambodia, in the Mekong River, where we brought together the traditional knowledge and put that under a usable platform to be accessed by the decision makers. That's most of the time, and especially during some crisis, we don't have capacity to ask, hey, what's happened? But we can predict, we can forecast, and we can then plan better if we bring all this together. This should work. I don't know, where do I point? Okay. It's the same, for instance, when we speak about citizen science. Citizen science, it's not just about using an app and go there and collect information. No, it's using traditional knowledge. And this is what happened, for instance, in Spain, in a biosphere reserve, where the local people, based on their interaction and knowledge in the ground, they were able to help in mapping the distribution range of very important species, in this case a nocturnal butterfly. And by bringing on board this information, it was the way to better design the level of protection of certain habitats that are relevant for water storage and for fighting erosion, landslides, and fast floods. The same with whale watching. We can combine in many remote areas, in particular in small island development states, the whale watching is a sort of alternative or a next stage when the fisheries are no longer sustainable. But we benefit from the knowledge of fishermen, all fishermen, that are passing this to not only do their own exercise and benefit and have income from this activity, but also for managing the resources and better use and understand what's happening. Well, using traditional and real ancestral information and practices is also another way. So we have here an example from Colombia where all information that is still some restricted information is being used to be passed for younger generations. And the way these traditional knowledge and practices are contributing to secure the health of ecosystems, it's really relevant. And when we speak about health of mountain ecosystems, we mean that we are safeguarding forests, and forests are the best protection against fast floods and rockfalls when we have such difficult topographies. The same with mangrove restoration. We have a project also in Latin America and in other countries that are using, this project is using local knowledge and local activities and local actors to promote restoration of ecosystems. And I will not speak about the role of mangrove in coastal erosion prevention, in protection against storms and cyclones. So there's a lot of evidence, whether here or in the Philippines or even in Mozambique also. That's why we saw this initiative of putting back some mangrove systems. So these are a few examples on how, from the practical point of view, we can, and of course, we don't have enough resources. People in the ground have no resources, but we are able to promote these, and we need to secure these type of activities and to share and to expand or even invest in a more intensive way. Because what we can offer from UNESCO is that there is a governance in place. We can monitor. And most of the times it's not a question of money, it's a question of capacity, it's a question of ensuring sustainability of the investment and sustainability and participation of the local actors under a very structured and sustainable way. And this is sometimes what we are not able to cope with, and sometimes this leads to, I wouldn't say failure, but we are not able to optimize. So please make use of your sites, make use of your programs, and let's together with the private sector, with different actors, with other development agencies, with academia, work together and bring this in a more and better way of communicating the best cases, because we are good in communicating failures and disasters, but we are not so good when communicating success cases and success stories. So this is not an ended product, but it is a process that deserves some attention, some investment, and we are here committed to continue this. So thank you very much. I'm looking forward for your comments and contributions. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio. So would I be right saying that UNESCO's vision is to support local communities in all member states, and especially through UNESCO sites, of course, and all activities? And of course, thank you for highlighting the role, well, we've been talking about the role of social resilience, of course, and ways to strengthen social resilience. Well, 1 hour, of course, it's not enough, never enough, especially for our few speakers who came from very far to join the discussion. But we have still, as I understand from colleagues, 10-15 minutes for question and answer session, and I would like to take some questions. Well, I will first give to Lady and then to Brazil. Yes, yes, please.
So thank you so much for everyone to share our experience and practices. I think this is important, this moment for that. And I'm representing Ministry of City of Brazil and the G20 Disaster Risk Reduction Working Group. And for us, when we discuss inequality and vulnerability to reduce that, we are addressing inclusive and all of a society approach. And more than a question, I want to share a perspective and make an invitation or a convocation for social participation in a high level. I think you are discussing the Sendai framework ahead, so I think you have to understand the social participation in a different level. And in G20 Disaster Risk Reduction Working Group, we have in our first in-person meeting in July, 2 panels with the support with one in DRR and UNESCO about social organization and natural-based solution. And in these 2 panels, we invited local community organizations, not only for be part of the audience, but to be speakers, because we need their narratives, their reality and their solutions and their demands. So, and maybe 10 days ago, the Brazilian team of this working group visited the Complexo do Alemão, a big slum in Rio de Janeiro, to visit the risky areas and discuss with the people what we are doing in an international level and a local perspective. So I think it's interesting when you bring the knowledge to science, to policies, but how can we bring the people to this high-level debate or decision-making? And more than we say about leave no one behind, the social movement says nothing about us without us. So I think this is a challenge, but an opportunity not only for invite the social participation and the projects and to be more resilient, but how can we, from the university, the international organization, and the governments can bring the people to discuss the policies and the implementation of these policies in the territory. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Shall I take it as a comment or a question? Who wants to comment?
No, I just want to, it's a very important point you are making, but I also wanted to mention that sometimes when we are looking at communities, they are very diverse and there are many diverse power relations. So maybe at a higher level, when we bring up the discourse, sometimes it doesn't come up equally for all sections of the community. So how do you engage with that at the level with targeted approach so that everybody is participating, maybe not together, maybe separately? I think that requires a little methodological approach, because many times the communities are used but misused in the way their voices are brought up at the higher level. But yes, it is really, really important, but very complex in societies, as you said.
Michelle?
If I may, I think one of the things we need to look at in terms of our capacity building is to ensure that our curriculum is designed that we understand as natural scientists as well as social scientists that we need to work with a diverse range of stakeholders, not just politicians and the private sector, but we need to work with all levels of stakeholders, including communities. I think the second thing that was touched upon is that we tend to participate. We can't always be using volunteerism. People have to work. People have to do things with their daily lives. And I think local communities, we have taken advantage as researchers of local communities to bring them on board to participate, and it's all on a voluntary basis. We need to be a bit more respectful of that. How to navigate that space is going to be a challenge for us. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Brazil, please.
Thank you very much. And thank you all the panelists for the different views, very rich views that we saw here. I don't mean to dominate the discussion from the point of view of Brazil, but so I'll try to be brief here, but I would just like to compliment and ask a couple of questions. Dialogue between science and indigenous knowledge is often thought of in terms of finding what is scientific in indigenous knowledge and how to translate the scientific knowledge to indigenous communities. Yet indigenous communities are known for having developed a sustainable relation with the environment that, where they live. We heard at the final presentation very briefly of some projects in which strategies for disaster risk reduction are being built not only by translating science to local communities, but in an actual dialogue with solutions being raised by indigenous communities together with scientists. But if it is possible, I would like to learn a bit further on that and to learn if UNESCO has a program or some line of action that we can benefit from in order to develop those solutions. As a second question, how about access of local communities, of individuals of local communities to universities? Is it a way of intensifying the dialogue between science and indigenous communities. And finally, as a broader reflection, since I said that indigenous communities are known for developing a sustainable relationship with the environment, maybe, and this is for a general reflection, protecting the rights of indigenous peoples, including their right to land, isn't already helping to reduce disaster risk. So I stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, Antonio, please.
Thank you very much, both for the global question as the other one. I will start by the last one. In fact, it is something that we need to learn on how to value and to integrate into policy and functional works or implementations this notion that integrity of natural systems, but also cultural dimensions, it's vital for ensuring sustainability. Because when we born, we go to school, for sure. We learn from our family. We have our social integration and development. But there is something that we tend to not pay attention and to give the adequate value. That is the landscape. The landscape where we live is part of our identity. And the landscape, in particular, the natural landscape, shapes very well and strongly what is the individual and collective identity and vision of the world. And if we are not able to understand and pay attention to this, and by some interventions we are not really ensuring the same identity, or if you want, landscape scenario, we are really destroying the structure and one of the pillars of what we used to call identity. And people get lost, and they go, they don't stay. Of course, it's a different reason, but the result is the same as when they don't have access to school, to health, and to infrastructures and other facilities. So when people is not really connected and recognizing the place where they are migrants, whatever typology you may want to consider. This is not bad or good, but this doesn't help to preserve diversity. That is what we need to ensure resilience at the global level, that each of us should have its own right to choose, but the own right to have the access and to keep the identity of the moment where we live, where we are born, that comes from the past. And this is what the indigenous knowledge shows very well. Why they are keeping some relations and why they build this knowledge that keeps nature and natural resources management as something relevant for them. It's also part, of course, they depend on, in a way, more directly, but they need this to be themselves. And this is something that I don't know how we integrate this, how we ensure this as part of the curricula, but not only in the curricula, it's not enough. We need to make this as part of the policy, instruments, and the way we address things. About the first question, that is to elaborate a little bit more, yes, all these initiatives that I briefly mentioned, since the early stages, they were discussed and designed at local level. We brought not only the scientists, but also the local community and within the communities to identify what is the problem and what may be the solutions. It's not good to go there and to try to sell or to give, even for free, a solution that we think it's the best one. It may work, that will be luck. It's not appropriate. And what are the impacts of any solution that we bring without understanding the social dynamics, even the language and the understanding and the perception of the existing and local actors? It will not work. Of course, these are small-scale examples, But my point here and what I am trying to sell here, it's let's use this as pilots to upscale, to share, to discuss what are the methods and the best cases, not about the result in itself, but the process, the methods, and to make sure that what we have now, the current tools, are not enough. We have things like free, previous, informed consent. But from the practical point of view, most of the times this leads to the same people saying the same thing everywhere. It's what it's called by these people like as participatory saturation. So we can continue, but I think I am exploring. It's the same people saying the same thing all the time, but not moving ahead. It's what I want to resume. So we need to change and shift a little bit the paradigm.
Serge, anything to add? And meanwhile, I profit just if,
Yes.
Please raise the nameplate if any other.
Just to build on what was said, it's certainly true that local solution developed with local communities based on indigenous knowledge is most often the most efficient way and the most cost-efficient way to deal with nature preservation and disaster reduction. It's also true that with climate change, you have new challenges, you have new pests, you have new disasters, more of the same, but also new disasters. So you need to bring new insight to share knowledge with other communities so that communities can adapt to the new events that bring, and quite fast, in fact. And second, the key players in our international committee are still the states. So you need to find a way to articulate the local communities and the national state. We have a tendency to harmonize and to try to bring a single framework for all their population. So we as a public entity discuss first with national state, and we have sometimes to convince them that we need to work together with local actors. So it's important to work at local level, but if we want to scale up, as was discussed also, we need to find a way to keep the states in this approach as well.
Thank you. Michel, briefly.
Just quickly to respond to the 3 points. The one on the role of the academy or universities. I think we need to have far greater harmony between the natural scientists and the social scientists working in interdisciplinary teams. How we get our messages across, I think we all think that as academics we're excellent communicators, but we are not. And we do need communication specialists who understand the language of the local communities. Sometimes we need translators to translate into the indigenous language or the dialect or patois of the population. So the behavioral scientists and the communication specialists need to be on board with those of us producing the research to articulate our message more clearly. Secondly, I think when we talk about local communities and inclusivity, it's interesting how it depends on how you're socialized. But if you bring women into a room with men, women say nothing. You put women in a room by themselves, and you will hear the loud voices and animated conversations. So I think we need to think about when we have these types of consultations, how we are going to get the best out of the inputs of women and the inputs of men in these kinds of meetings where the dialogue is needed, but the richness of both perspectives of both genders would be important. That I think we need to work out those things clearly. And one of the presenters on the vernacular architecture mentioned there is no universal solution. Even within countries and within communities, these ideas and situations are not, they're place specific, so that communities differ, they're not homogeneous. And I think we need to remember that we need to do some reconnaissance work before we go into these communities and work collaboratively. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see raised nameplates. I've also checked questions online that I think, well, thank you very much for online questions, but I think we reflected them in the discussion. There were many questions about the role of indigenous peoples. Maybe just one last short question just to crystallize these linkages between science and culture heritage. There was a question on other specific assessment tools, internationally recognized, scientifically approved, but on assessment of nature, culture, heritage exposure, including sites, maybe, and potential impact. Maybe Rohit?
Yeah, sure. Yes, there are many tools actually available and many are in the process of being developed. I just give one example. There's a tool called Climate Vulnerability Index, CVI, and actually if you Google search you can find it. It has been continuously updated now, and it actually is a very interesting tool which helps you to really assess vulnerability to climate risks, specifically targeting heritage sites, both natural and cultural. And it has been also applied in several sites as well. Another interesting tool is ABC method for risk assessment, which has been used very much for, but more specific to museum objects and collections, and not to the. And then there is also a larger. So one has to also realize there are both quantitative and qualitative tools. There's a tool which has also been developed, qualitative risk assessment for heritage sites, and actually it is in the resource manual for managing disaster risks to World Heritage, which is a UNESCO resource manual. So again, that has been continuously updated, and in fact, in the new version, you will have another revised version of the tool. So I just want to mention that there are all these tools, but there are no recipes. They are all to be applied more specific to each context. They can be tailored, they can be creatively used, because after all, our idea is to get some good decision making, let's say decision making indicators. There are several tools there, but we need to be creative enough to use them.
Thank you. And with that, we reach the end of the session. Thank you to dear panelists for all these insights that we hope will nourish further discussion of post-Sendai era. With that, I invite our audience to continue reflections during the coffee break, and we'll be back at 4:30, back to the room to the last session on economics on disaster risk reduction. So online participants, stay tuned. Thank you.
Hello, maybe we can start. I think this is the last session, so I hope we can finish nice and easy. So I would like to invite a panelist on the podium. The next session is about economics on investment on disaster risk reduction. So I would like to invite Mr. Paolo Abner, a senior economist from the World Bank, please. And also Mr. Raghavan Pant from senior researcher from Oxford University. Yes, please come to the podium. And also Ms. Pauline George, project officer in Expertise France. And Mr. Mahefas Ladinajun from University of Antananarivo. And lastly, Mr. Kit Miyamoto, CEO from Miyamoto International. So, last panel is about economics. I think during the day we hear several comments about the fundings or need of the investment, etc. And also I think UN or World Bank is saying like if you invest $1 for prevention, you will save up to like $50 for unnecessary reconstruction recovery fees. We kind of know this by experience that if we invest in beforehand, it pays off. But somehow, we don't do it. So we want to discuss on these issues. No? from a more like a theoretical point of view, or more like a actual cases, or maybe we can talk about like a, some decision,